Hi everyone, my name is Isabella Carter. And before I tell you my story, please make sure to subscribe to this channel, like this video, and comment below where you're watching from, because what I'm about to share might sound like something out of a movie, but I promise you, it's real. Now let me take you back to the day I realized the man I loved the most saw me as someone who didn't belong. He once looked at me with those cold, perfect blue eyes and said, "Bella, you're sweet, but you'll never belong in my world." I remember that night so vividly, the soft clinking of champagne glasses, the polite laughter of people who thought they were better than everyone else. And there I was, standing beside the man I loved, realizing for the first time that he was embarrassed of me. Those words didn't just hurt, they burned. They replayed in my mind when I lay awake at night, when I walked through rooms full of people pretending not to notice me, when I started doubting the very person I was. For a long time, I believed him. I believed I wasn't enough. But one day, something inside me shifted. I looked in the mirror and decided I would never again ask for a seat at someone else's table. I'd build my own. And now, the same people who once whispered that I didn't belong, they try to dress like me, talk like me, even be me. He said I'd never belong in his world. But now, it's his world that doesn't belong in mine. I used to believe that love could fix anything, that if your heart was pure and your intentions were honest, everything else would fall into place, like the ending of a fairy tale. That was me, Isabella Carter, 24, full of dreams, and completely blind to the kind of world I was walking into. I met Ethan on a rainy Tuesday afternoon at the art gallery where I worked. He came in wearing a dark gray suit, his hair slightly wet from the rain, carrying the kind of confidence that filled the room before he even spoke. He wasn't like anyone I'd ever met. His words were smooth, his laughter low and charming. When he asked about a painting, I told him it reminded me of the kind of love that doesn't fade. He smiled and said, "Maybe one day, you'll paint ours." Those words, they melted me. He came back the next day. And the next. Before I knew it, we were having coffee after work, talking about everything from art to childhood dreams to places we wanted to visit someday. He listened in a way that made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. He made promises about forever, about building a life together, about how he loved that I wasn't like those other women who only cared about status and money. He said I was real, and I believed him. When he proposed 6 months later, it felt like a dream. He took me to a rooftop dinner, with fairy lights strung across the skyline and soft jazz playing in the background. He went down on one knee and said, "Isabella, you make my world brighter. Be my forever." I said yes through tears, because at that moment, I thought I'd found the kind of love people write about. Everyone told me I was lucky. My coworkers gushed about how handsome he was, how elegant. My mother cried when she saw the ring. Even I couldn't stop smiling when I looked at it, thinking, this is it, my fairy tale beginning. I moved into his apartment, a stunning penthouse that overlooked the city. Everything was polished, expensive, and cold. But I ignored the chill because I was in love. In those early days, I tried my best to blend into his lifestyle. I learned the names of the wines he liked, the people he worked with, the restaurants his friends preferred. I told myself that soon, I'd feel like I belonged. What I didn't realize then was that fairy tales often hide their monsters behind handsome faces and perfect smiles. Because while I was falling deeper in love with him, he was already building the walls that would one day keep me out. The first time I realized I didn't belong in Ethan's world was during a dinner party at his friend's mansion. It was one of those glittering evenings, expensive champagne, laughter that echoed off marble walls, and women who looked like they'd stepped out of fashion magazines. I wore a soft lavender dress, simple but elegant. I'd spent hours getting ready, wanting to look perfect for him. But the moment we walked in, I felt it, that subtle shift in the air, the way people's eyes scanned me, lingering just a second too long before they smiled politely. They weren't being cruel. No, it was worse than that. They were being gracefully dismissive. At the table, someone asked what I did for a living. Before I could answer, Ethan laughed and said, "She paints for fun." The way he said it, light, casual, almost proud, made everyone else laugh softly. And I just smiled, pretending not to notice the sting in my chest. After that night, it became a pattern. Every gathering, every social event, I felt like a guest actor in someone else's movie, the woman everyone saw but no one really looked at. The wives of his colleagues would exchange compliments that sounded like tiny knives. "Your dress is adorable," one of them said once. "I wish I could pull off something so simple." Their husbands barely remembered my name. They called me Ethan's girl, or the painter. Ethan never defended me. He just brushed it off with a smile and whispered, "Don't take it personally, Bella. They just don't understand your kind of life." But wasn't I supposed to be part of his life? I tried, I really did. I learned how to speak their language. The right wine to order, the right charities to mention, the right smiles to give when people bragged about their vacations in Milan. But no matter how hard I tried, I could feel the invisible wall between us, made of status, money, and silent judgment. Ethan began to change too. He became colder, more distant. The man who used to bring me coffee in bed now barely looked up from his phone. The conversations that once lasted for hours turned into short exchanges about schedules and dinner reservations. He stopped asking about my paintings. He stopped seeing me. I remember one night, standing by the window in that giant penthouse, looking down at the city lights. I felt so small, like the world I'd entered wasn't built for me at all. That's when I realized something painful but true. They would never accept me, because I reminded them of everything they secretly despised: simplicity, sincerity, and warmth. And Ethan, the man who once claimed to love those things, started to despise them too. That was the night I stopped trying to fit in and started to plan my way out. Our second wedding anniversary was supposed to be magical. Ethan said he wanted to throw a small celebration, which, in his world, meant an event so grand it made the local society pages. The apartment was transformed into a ballroom of glass and gold. Waiters in white gloves carried trays of champagne. A jazz band played softly in the corner. Everyone was dressed to perfection, diamonds glittering, laughter floating through the air like perfume. I remember standing in front of the mirror before we left, smoothing down the silk of my gold gown. I wanted to look perfect, not for them, but for him. I told myself, maybe tonight he'll finally see me again. When we arrived, cameras flashed. He held my hand for exactly 3 seconds, long enough for a few photos, and then disappeared into a crowd of his business partners. I smiled, greeted guests, did what a good wife was supposed to do. But inside, I felt invisible. An hour later, I found him standing near the bar with his friends, glasses raised, laughter echoing through the room. I approached quietly, and that's when I heard it. One of his friends said, "Ethan, you've done well for yourself. She's beautiful, but she doesn't really fit the vibe, does she?" The men chuckled. And then my husband, the man who once swore he loved me for being different, said, "She's cute, but she'll never belong in this circle. She's just different." Different. Such a harmless word, yet it sliced through me like glass. They laughed again, and he didn't even glance my way. I stood there for a moment, frozen, clutching my glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. My ears buzzed, my throat burned, but I kept smiling because breaking down wasn't an option in his world. So I turned and walked toward the balcony. Outside, the night was quiet. The city stretched before me, thousands of lights twinkling like a universe I no longer belonged to. My reflection stared back from the glass door, a woman who looked perfect on the outside but was falling apart inside. I stayed there for a long time, replaying his words over and over. She'll never belong. And that was the moment something in me cracked, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet, painful snap deep in my chest. When he finally came outside, hours later, he wrapped an arm around my waist and smiled for another photo, as if nothing had happened. And I smiled too, perfectly composed, perfectly silent. That night, as we drove home, I stared out the window and made myself a silent promise. If I would never belong in his world, then one day, I'd build a world where he didn't belong. After that party, something in me went silent. Not broken, just quiet. I stopped arguing. I stopped defending myself. I smiled when he spoke, nodded when he dismissed me, and moved through our penthouse like a ghost wearing lipstick. But inside, I was changing. The version of me that once lived for his attention, she was gone. What remained was someone colder, wiser, and dangerously calm. I started waking up earlier, before the city came alive, before Ethan's alarm went off. I'd sit by the big window in our living room, a cup of coffee in one hand, my sketchbook in the other, and I'd paint. Every stroke on that canvas was like breathing again, quiet rebellion in color and form. At first, it was just therapy. Then, slowly, it became purpose. One morning, I posted one of my paintings online. No caption, no expectations, just a small piece of my soul. By evening, it had thousands of likes. Someone messaged me, asking if it was for sale. That tiny spark lit something inside me. I created a new page, Isabella Art. I didn't tell Ethan. I didn't tell anyone. Every day, after he left for work, I painted. Every night, I posted. Within weeks, my art started spreading, shared by influencers, reposted by magazines, and even featured on an online art blog. Brands reached out for collaborations. Commissions started pouring in. I had gone from being Ethan's wife who paints for fun to a woman building something real, quietly, secretly. Meanwhile, Ethan barely noticed. He was too busy hosting dinners, sealing deals, and surrounding himself with people who clapped when he walked into a room. He didn't see the small packages arriving at the house, the art supplies, the framed prints, the quiet growth of a dream he'd once dismissed. Every time I got an order, every time a stranger appreciated my work, it felt like a piece of myself returning home. I was no longer asking to belong. I was creating a place that was mine alone. And with each painting I sold, I bought back my dignity, my confidence, my freedom. But I never said a word to him. Not yet. Because revenge doesn't always begin with fire. Sometimes it starts with silence. So I stayed quiet, watching him drift further into his world of appearances while I built something real in the shadows. At night, when he came home and talked about his important people, I just smiled to myself, knowing that somewhere out there, people were celebrating me, my work, my story, my art. He thought I was fading, but in truth, I was just getting ready to shine. That silence, calm, measured, and deliberate, was the beginning of my storm. It didn't happen suddenly. People imagine moments of leaving as dramatic, shouting, slamming doors, tears. But when your soul's been dying slowly for years, the end comes quietly. For me, it began on a Thursday morning. Ethan was standing in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie. He looked perfect as always, every hair in place, every move calculated. He told me he had an important company gala that evening. I smiled and said, "What time should I be ready?" He glanced at me in the mirror, his tone casual but cutting. "It's not really your kind of event, Bella. It's high profile. You wouldn't be comfortable there." He didn't even look at me after saying it. Just picked up his watch and left. The silence that followed was deafening. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, his words replaying in my mind. Not your kind of event. That single sentence carried the weight of every insult, every dismissal, every night I spent trying to prove I was enough. And suddenly, I felt nothing.
No anger, no heartbreak.
Just a strange, freeing emptiness. I stood up, walked to my art room, the only place in that penthouse that felt like mine, and looked around. Paintings leaned against every wall, sunlight spilling through the curtains, colors glowing quietly. This was my world, the one I built in silence. I opened my laptop, checked my messages, and saw 3 new commissions waiting. One was from a celebrity's assistant who wanted to buy an entire collection. I stared at that message for a long time, tears welling up. Not from sadness, from pride. I realized I didn't need him anymore. Not his approval. Not his name. Not his world.
So I packed.
Not everything, just the essentials. A suitcase with clothes, my sketchbook, a few brushes, and a framed painting, the first one I ever sold. When Ethan came home that night, the apartment was quiet. I was sitting by the window, suitcase by my side. He frowned. What's going on? I looked at him, calm and steady. You're right, Ethan. I don't belong in your world. He opened his mouth to speak, but I didn't let him. Because I'm building mine. He tried to laugh it off. Bella, don't be ridiculous. But I stood up, walked toward the door, and said softly, I was ridiculous for believing you ever deserved me. And then I left.
No crying.
No turning back. When the elevator doors closed, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. That was the day I walked away from his world, and into the life I was meant to live. The first morning after I left Ethan, I woke up in a tiny apartment with peeling wallpaper and a window that barely closed. It was quiet, too quiet, but for the first time, that silence didn't scare me. I made myself coffee, sat cross-legged on the floor, and watched the sunlight pour in through the curtains. It felt warm, alive, mine. I had no idea what came next. No plan, no certainty, just freedom. And that was enough. In the days that followed, I poured everything I had into my art. I painted from sunrise to sunset. Every heartbreak, every insult, every piece of myself I'd buried for him. My emotions bled onto those canvases in shades of fire and gold. People online noticed. My page began to grow faster than I could have imagined. Art magazines reached out. Influencers tagged me. A small brand collaboration turned into a partnership. Within months, I was earning more than I ever did while being Ethan's wife. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the power that came with knowing I'd built it alone. I opened my own studio, Luna Atelier. I chose the name because Luna means moon, the light that shines after darkness. My studio became a space for women like me, artists, dreamers, survivors, to create, to heal, to reclaim themselves. I remember the day of the grand opening. The air smelled like fresh paint and roses. People filled the gallery, admiring my work, taking pictures, congratulating me. Reporters asked about my story, and for the first time, I told it without shame, not as a victim, but as a woman who rose. Then one afternoon, he walked in. Ethan. He looked different, older, maybe tired. He stood at the door, staring at my name on the wall. Isabella Carter, founder and artist. I didn't move. I just watched him take it all in, the art, the people, the laughter. The world I'd built from the pieces he once broke. He finally walked up to me, that familiar half-smile tugging at his lips. Bella, he said softly, you've changed. I smiled back, calm, poised, untouchable.
No, Ethan.
I just stopped trying to be small enough for you. He looked around, eyes flickering with regret, pride, maybe even envy. But I didn't care anymore. His opinion, once my lifeline, meant nothing now. That day, I realized my victory wasn't about making him jealous. It was about standing in my truth, knowing I no longer needed anyone to validate my worth. I became the woman I used to dream of being, confident, free, and full of color. The woman he said didn't belong in his world, had built one so radiant, he could only stand at the door and watch. If you've listened to my story until now, I want to tell you something. This isn't just about me. It's about every woman who's ever been told she's not enough. Because somewhere out there, maybe even right now, there's a woman sitting in her car, holding back tears after being made to feel small by someone she loves. There's a woman trying to shrink herself to fit into a life that doesn't see her worth. And to you, I want to say this clearly. You do not have to earn your place in someone else's world. You can build your own. When I first walked away from Ethan, I thought I'd lost everything: love, comfort, stability, identity. But what I didn't realize then was that I was making space for something far greater: myself. You see, sometimes the most painful endings are just quiet beginnings in disguise. The nights I cried alone turned into the mornings I painted with peace. The loneliness that used to scare me became the freedom that shaped me. Every bruise on my heart became a brushstroke that told the story of survival. And now, when I walk into a room, I no longer need anyone's approval. I carry my own. So to every woman listening, If someone ever makes you feel like you don't belong, don't fight for a seat at their table. Build your own table. Decorate it with everything that makes you you. The world will try to convince you that you need to be quieter, smaller, softer. That success belongs to those born into it. But let me tell you something. The strongest women I know were built, not born, into greatness. They rose from heartbreak, from failure, from being underestimated. And when they finally shone, the world called them lucky. No, darling, that's not luck. That's power. The kind that's earned in silence and revealed in strength. If I could go back in time and talk to the younger version of myself, the girl in the gold gown, smiling through humiliation, I'd hold her hand and whisper, "One day, you'll thank him for not believing in you." Because his rejection became my rebirth. So to every woman watching this, whether you're in your 20s or 50s, whether you're healing or rebuilding, remember this. You are already enough. You always were. And one day, when they see who you've become, they'll realize they never stood a chance of dimming your light. If my story touched you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. Tell me where you're watching from and what this story meant to you. Because no matter where you are in your journey, your story isn't over. It's just beginning. If this story touched you, leave a comment and share your thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life stories of love, betrayal, and strength.